Hello and welcome to Tech 101 with me. I just want to start by saying if you've come here thinking that I'm going to be able to teach you everything about tech in the next hour and a half, 2 hours, sorry to disappoint you, but I cannot teach you everything. I have tried to cover as much as possible, so we're going to cover a lot, but probably not in great detail on any particular part, just kind of to give you a flavor of kind of what we do as technicians, what kind of our job entails, and kind of a bit of knowledge about kind of how we do it. So just a bit about me, because I feel like a bit of background, kind of where my expertise lie. So that is me. I actually trained initially as an actor. So I didn't start in tech. I haven't always wanted to be a technician. I actually got all the way up and did a university degree at Plymouth Marjon University and trained to be an actor. So that is kind of where my passion was. It still is. I haven't done acting in a little bit, but hope to go back to it at some point. I then met Jamie Smith at the Barbican Theatre. So he was the technician who did all the assessments on my course. Jamie.
Hi, everyone.
So he kind of invited me to come to the Barbican Theatre and join Tech Force. Now, Tech Force was a training program where kind of we did over multiple weeks and we kind of taught people to be technicians. I then later on stayed on and helped Jamie to actually teach Tech Force as I learned more knowledge and kind of grew as a professional technician myself. I then applied for a job at the university that I graduated from, so Plymouth Marjon University, and got that job, and then I've been working there ever since, as well as freelancing at the Barbican and on various projects kind of across the Southwest. So I've been in the industry from when I first started with Jamie for 7 years, which is not a lot for a technician, but over those 7 years I have learnt a lot. And it's kind of I said that I can't teach you everything in these 2 hours. I feel like you can't teach tech kind of in any particular time frame because the industry is changing constantly. So when I first started 7 years ago, LED was it wasn't new, but it was kind of, no one really had it too much in the small scale theatres. And now it's kind of moving into kind of being a lot more prevalent everywhere. A good analogy for how quickly tech is changing in the theatre industry, it's kind of kept up in the kind of same speed as mobile phones. So if you imagine your mobile phone 10 years ago and how different your phone is now, that's kind of how fast our industry is changing and will continue to change as we find new ways of doing stuff. So that's part of something I really love because it is constantly learning, constantly finding new stuff. With COVID, we are now moving very quickly into an area that I haven't done a huge amount in, but I'm learning very quickly, and that's live streaming. So people who are coming in from Zoom and later will be seeing on YouTube. This whole setup is a quick learn this year, and I'm quite comfortable in it now. But if you'd have asked me this time last year can you quickly set up a live stream and put it out, I'd have panicked for an hour and then maybe bodged something together. But it's something technicians are constantly adapting, constantly having to relearn. Over the 7 years, I've done quite a few projects. So these are just a couple of photos from some of the shows that I've done. I've done a fair few on this stage at the Barbican Theatre, designed for them. So the dead center one, and the bottom center and the middle left all came onto this stage. But then I've also done, so this bottom one I toured, and some of the other ones I also toured across various venues across the UK. And it's a learning curve. Touring is a whole other world that I'm not going to go into now because, like I said, this is a whistle-stop tour. So I've done everything from theatre shows to gigs to dance lighting to kind of basically most things that you can do on a stage. I've probably dabbled in somewhere in the 7 years. So I've done quite a lot. Lighting is my passion. I can operate sound and I can operate AV, but lighting is kind of where my real talents lie. Today I will be touching on sound systems because it's important to know how to do it at least basically as a tech, but lighting is kind of where my forte is. So we're going to start with a lighting system and how to build a lighting system. Now, a lighting system, no matter how extravagant or how small, has 4 main components that every single lighting system has to have to make it work. So the first thing is a controller. So it needs a way of controlling the lights that you're going to be putting out. So we call that a lighting desk or a lighting console. Over here, so I've set my Blue Peter moment, one I've set up earlier. We have a ETC Ion XE, and that is our lighting desk, and I will show you kind of the important bits. A controller just controls the lights, so we can program on it. Some desks you can't program on, some you just have faders, and you have to kind of busk it. But all of them have the same thing in common, that they control the lights that you are going to use. So that's the Ion XE. The second thing is data. So we need the desk to be able to talk to the lights that are out in the rig, all the lanterns. So there are 2 ways currently of doing it, and that is DMX and ArtNet. Now, ArtNet, I'm not going to go into detail on. It's very complicated. Well, it's very expansive in the amount that you can talk about it, and I just don't have the time. ArtNet's usually reserved for the slightly bigger theaters or the more up-to-date, because ArtNet is kind of the thing that everyone's moving towards. DMX is what we use here at the Barbican, and I use up at Marjon as well. DMX, a universe can hold 512 channels. Basically, 512 different pieces of information can come down a single DMX line, and we call this single 512 thing a universe. An ArtNet can basically, it runs over Cat5 or Cat6, and or your standard Ethernet cable for your internet, and it can take 256 universes. So a universe is 512 channels, and ArtNet can do 256 of those universes down a single cable. So obviously, as you can do the maths, suddenly you can cut a lot more lights that a single controller can control. Like I said, we use DMX, and we can do multiple universes from this desk. The Ion XE can do 4 universes, and that's more than enough for what we use in this relatively small theater. Yeah. The third thing, oh, there's a DMX cable. The third thing is power. Now, there are 2 ways to get power to your fixtures, and that depends on whether they are tungsten or generic fixtures, or if they're intelligent or LED. So intelligent fixtures have the built-in dimmer, which basically tells it, rather than just giving it power, it basically goes, you need to be at this brightness. And that's how DMX, that's how intelligent fixtures work. For normal things, such as normal fixtures like par cans and anything tungsten, and I'll show you one of each in a minute, we use what's called a dimmer, which you asked about earlier. So this is a dimmer pack. This is a 088 beta 2, and basically it's as simple as it plugs in and goes, I will give you a certain percentage of power depending on what the controller or the lighting desk tells you. I was about to say simple as that. It's not simple, and you can learn for hours and hours about the ins and outs of how it physically works. But for you guys, it's basic. On Tech 101, it gives you a certain amount of power, the light gets brighter. As simple as that. And the final thing is a fixture. Like I said, you can have intelligent fixtures or you can have generic fixtures. I've got an example of both here. So this is a ETC source for, color source spot deep blue. That's its full name. And then this is a source for Fresnel. So the Fresnel is this Fresnel is a tungsten fixture. So it has a common or garden bulb in it, which we call a lamp. And you could get technicians talking for hours about the difference between a lamp and a bulb. But these have lamps in, and then the color source is an LED fixture. So there is fixtures. What does my PowerPoint do next? Okay. LED versus tungsten. So there are lots of pros and cons of both. I personally love tungsten for the richness of its color and the kind of the warmth of its light on a person and kind of the fullness of the light, whereas LED can be a bit hollow, is what I have tend to find. This over on this side, this is a rig that has just par cans in it. So it's a generic profiles only, and they've just got colored gels in all of them to change the color. On the other side, you've got a fully LED rig where it's a load of moving lights doing various things. And again, moving lights is a whole other topic that we're not going to cover in this particular Tech 101. So I'm going to quickly show you a little bit about just kind of a practical of the system and kind of some of the plus sides to using our LED fixtures that we have here. So I'm going to start with the tungsten though. So a tungsten fixture, as I said, when you increase the value on the controller, it sends a signal through the DMX to the dimmer and says, I need X amount of percentage of power going to that fixture. So if I set this to 50%, then it comes on at half power because it's that's what it's told. I can then increase that all the way up to full brightness. Fresnels, I'm not going to go too much into detail. These are called barn doors on the outside, and they're used to shutter light so that you kind of take it off where you don't want the light to hit, just using standard shadows. And as you can see, I can bring it in quite small. I don't know why you'd ever bring it in quite this small, but you can. So that's a tungsten bulb. As you can see, it's got a slightly orange tinge, and that's just because the filament in tungsten it burns that kind of bright, that warm light. Do I step in?
No. I was going to say it's about the Kelvin, and so light is measured in Kelvin, which is an old scientific way of determining how bright a source is. I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically the sun has a certain Kelvin level, like 50,000, something like that. And then different light sources have different sets of brightness Kelvin. And tungsten is 3,200, I believe, around that level. And then LED sources have their own different levels, but it's to do with the brightness and the intensity.
Yeah. So as I said several times, we could talk for hours, and we have in previous Tech Forces and other sessions. We can teach this for weeks on end and still only scratch the surface. So this is just a whistle-stop tour. Okay, so that is tungsten, and the other one is LED. So this is an LED fixture, and it is a color source. The best thing about this particular fixture for us is that it is a color changing. So we don't have to put lots of different gels in. We have every color or almost every color at our disposal. So if we need to go to green, we want to go to blue, pink, red, we have a full range of color, which is very useful in a rig where we can have less fixtures doing the washes and the kind of, if they're doing the same thing. Previously on tungsten, you had to have several fixtures doing the same thing just in different colors, or get a color a color changer, scroller. It's called color scroller, which scrolled through different gels. But now we can literally, at the click of a button, we can just make, we want it to go blue. We want it to go green. It's very useful, and it kind of saves us a lot of time rigging and programming.
And also power.
Yes. So the other really strong thing is, really strong argument to go to LED is this particular fixture, the Fresnel, and lots of fixtures, they sit around the 750 watt of power. 750 to 1 kilowatt of power for it to be on. Now that is a lot of power, especially if you start to think about big rigs like kind of arenas and stuff like that. Suddenly you're looking at a lot of power needing to come into a building. And in terms of environmental side, that is not so good for our environment. LEDs, this one I believe is 50 watt?
No, it's 120.
Okay, 120 watt. So suddenly we could fit 7 or 8 fixtures of the LED before we start using the power of one fixture. So suddenly we're using a lot less power and it's a lot better for the environment and our electricity bill as well, which is not necessarily important, but
The other thing to note that's a big saving is also the lamp. So the lamp in a tungsten fixture typically lasts like about 100 hours. And then after that, after its lifespan, it will pop, explode and die. You have to buy a new one. The lamps cost between 10 and 20 quid each. A LED lighting fixture, they can have excess of 50,000 hours, where we don't have to change the lamps. They go on and on for a much bigger amount of time without having to change the lamps. Obviously, the cost of gels as well is quite a big saving. Like sheets of gels, which are used in tungsten fixtures, sheet of gel, which will do you about 10 fixtures, costs about 10 quid. So looking at nearly a pound a fixture is what it costs each time you need to change. And obviously, when you put a gel in, that's the color it's fixed at in the rig. So your creative possibilities when you're doing a show are very limited when you have tungsten fixtures with gels. Obviously, with the LED fixtures that don't require the gels, they generate all their own colors and everything like that. You don't need to worry about it, and there's a big cost saving. So.
It's also very useful in that sense when there's been a couple of shows where I know what I want for most of it, and then there are kind of some scenes where I'm like, I could do this, I could do that. I don't know what I want to do when I'm designing it, and then I need to be in the space and go, yes, that is the color that I want during the tech. It's very useful that I can just go, I thought it was going to be this turquoise, and I actually need it a little bit darker. And on an LED, that's very easy. On our color changing LEDs, that's very easy. For generic fixtures, I'd have to then get a ladder out, go up to the ladder, change out the gel if I have the right gel. If I don't have the right gel, then I'm stuck. So creatively, it opens a lot of doors for you to just kind of be in the space and play. And quite a lot, I'm sure Jamie will agree with me, quite a lot of kind of how I've learnt a lot as tech is just to play and just kind of have a lighting desk. I say just have a lighting desk in front of me as if that's very easy and everyone has one. But if you have the chance, and I'm sure if any of you want to, Jamie, I'm sure is very happy to talk to you about potentially coming in and playing with desks. COVID, obviously, there'll be rules and everything, but there are ways that you can, through the Barbican Theatre, kind of learn as you do. And there's lots of opportunity to kind of shadow Jamie on shows when we get shows back in after COVID.
We can do it.
Lots of people ask, why don't we just scrap tungsten then and everyone just move to LED? There's so many positives about LED. Why would we bother manufacturing more tungsten fixtures? Why would we bother even owning any? And Jamie came up with this very nice analogy of, think of it like cars. You've got technology that is old, like classic cars. They work so well, they're so good at what they do, and that nothing is really quite comparable to kind of the original. So Parkans have been around for longer than I've been alive, far longer than I've been alive. And it's because they're so good at what they do. They're simple, they're easy to kind of set up and sort out. And if they go wrong, it's simple electronics. Whereas if an LED breaks, you have to go deep into kind of computing to try and fix it. And most of the time, we just send the fixture off to someone who does it day in, day out, because it will be better. They're just better at doing it, and it's less time consuming for us.
Yeah. One downside to more intelligent lighting fixtures is the maintenance side. If it breaks, quite often with an intelligent LED fixture, it's very difficult to instantly fix it. It can take either a long period of time or you have to send away. But obviously a tungsten fixture, it's just very basic wiring. You can quite often see the issue obviously, so you can change it and
Yeah.
repair it quickly.
Yeah, quick repairs are easier on tungsten fixtures than they are on intelligent. Yeah, so, and there are, of course, there are some tungsten fixtures that should be scrapped and they should never see the light of day again. And that's like those old bangers you see that you kind of go, you should probably upgrade. So there's kind of a nice middle ground where we kind of tend to use a mixture, and most rigs will be using a mixture of LED and tungsten for that very reason, that you don't need to get rid of it because some of it does its job brilliantly. For example, personally, I do, because of, as I mentioned earlier, LED light is quite hollow. I don't like LED as face light because in theatre, the face light is very important. And I think personally, especially when you get those nice deep oranges or you quite a warm wash, LED currently, or the LED fixtures that we have, doesn't match a good old tungsten fixture. When you want to do backlight and you want to change the colors and kind of do stuff like that, of course, it's so versatile, it'd be silly not to use it. But there are certain occasions, and I will talk about it in a bit, but there are certain occasions where you need to use the right fixture for the job. And for me, as a designer, I prefer a tungsten face light. Some designers prefer LED face light, and some like a fully LED rig. And that's absolutely fine. And that's why being a designer is great, because it's so different. I'm very different to Jamie when he designs, and we're very different to other people when they design. And hopefully if you guys enjoying teching and you guys move into kind of designing or anything like that, you'll be very different to what I'm like or what Jamie's like. And that's kind of how we can create new and exciting kind of designs and things that people have never seen before, because everyone has their own style. And Jamie's just playing with the lights. Oh, yeah. Cool. So I'm going to take a slight turn now. We're going to move just onto sound systems just for a second. And that's because they are very similar in their components and their makeup to a lighting system. So they're very, very similar. So you need a controller. So you need a sound desk. There's one currently there that's working the sound for the Zoom call and for the live streaming. And so you need, that's the one that we have up in the box, but this is the different one. You need data. You need to be able to send the information from the sound desk out to whatever speakers you have. So again, you have cables. This is called an XLR cable. There are lots of other types of cable. So again, I could go into passive systems versus active systems, but we'll be here all day, all evening. Power. In sound systems, this is in the form of amps or amplifiers, and they take the signal from the sound desk, they convert it into an electrical signal and send it out to the speakers. And then finally, you have the speaker, which is out. Again, active versus passive. The amp sometimes is within the speaker, so that's an active speaker. The amp is all in one kind of unit, so it's like it's almost like the LED version, the LED of the sound world. Oh yeah, that's a nice way of thinking. Passive system, and active system. Like I said, as you can see, it's very similar setup. And again, exactly the same as lighting. The more complicated the speaker, the more that can go wrong, and it's harder to fix. In the olden days where you have passive speakers, the speaker itself is made up of a cone and basically the housing, the casing, and that's basically all it is. In modern speakers, like the sound system we've got in here, it's a lot of electrics inside, and again, when it breaks, it's not a quick fix in any respect. QLab. Now, QLab is the sound or the software that we use here and lots of other theatres use as their kind of their programming of sound cues, sound cues, video cues, and more recently, lighting cues can actually be done through QLab as well. We personally don't use it for that, but that's just because we have our lighting desks and they're more permanently installed and they can do a lot more, a lot quicker. It takes a little while to program lighting on QLab, but again, that could just be because I haven't learned it enough, and as I learn, I'm sure I'd get faster, but I tend to not need to use lighting. So here we use it just for sound and video. So in the software, you can put a series of cues, so rather than you having to quickly move stuff around in the actual show, it's pre-programmed. There's no need to worry about that. Once you've done it in the tech, 9 times out of 10, it stays exactly how it's meant to for the show. Obviously, you have to check that before a show, but 9 times out of 10, nothing will change between tech and show. You can adjust levels, so you can adjust how loud something is. For the video, you can adjust how it looks on a screen. You can change its size. You can do lots of stuff with it. QLab is a whole session in itself. And I believe there's more, potentially there should be more technical 101s in future series. And I'm sure those will be a lot more, this is how light system, this is how sound system, this is how QLab works. But for this whistle stop tour, if I go too much more into detail, hours, literally hours spent. Again, I personally found the easiest way that I found to learn QLab was to actually play with it and kind of see what happens if I change this setting. What does it do? Oh, it does that, cool. Can I make that cool into a show? Probably. Save that for later. And then next time I'm doing a show, I go, oh, I've come up with this brilliant idea. And yeah, you can use that in future shows. It's very useful. There's lots of things you can also do in there, but again, I'm not going to go quite into all that. I'm now going to we're going to shift into kind of what we do, as in, so I'm going to talk you through what happens. But this is what people think we do. Which, when you get to show, that is pretty much what we're doing. But there is a lot happening, in the lead up to that. So I'm just going to kind of run you through the kind of, not day in the life, but show in the life of a technician. So we start with production meetings. This is where all the creative team will be in a meeting, the directors, this is for theatre shows I'm going to talk about, rather than music gigs, etc. Production meetings, so we talk to the director, we find out what their vision for the show is, because they're basically the boss of us. If they don't like something, they're basically one of the few people who can tell us to change stuff when it comes to show and kind of thing, because they have the overriding kind of vision of what the show is meant to look like. And so in these meetings, they talk to us and we kind of get on the same page, and then we can go and work creatively to fulfill what they want. So they're kind of the boss of us. We form ideas, again, by discussion with the director, but quite often the director will be talking and kind of just like I personally, I'm a very visual person. So in my head, they'll say, I want it to go to a castle at night. And at that point, I'm immediately going, cool, so we can have, there'll be lots of shadows. It's going to be kind of a grayish kind of look. We can use lots of floor lights and boom lights, and kind of your mind starts creating how it will look. I personally start at the end, how I want it to look, and then I can work backwards, working out what I need to do to get to that place. The next thing is we do need to talk to the designer, so whoever's designing the set, because if their set is entirely orange and we decide that we want everything to be a cold kind of blue, then it's going to clash. We need to be kind of in one piece with the whole production, has to kind of be all on the same page. So that'll all happen in production meetings as well, but also we'll have separate meetings with designers to sort that out. Pinterest, I love Pinterest. It's where you can steal all the best ideas from. Designing is quite a lot of using what people have done before, because you partly don't want to reinvent the wheel. If someone's done it well before, you can take bits of other shows, or you can take bits of kind of pictures you see and kind of make it all into the design.
Yeah, just to add to that, about lighting design, often you refer to like physical images and like paintings, photographs, and like images that you find on the internet or however, kind of will show you like a palette of color, and that image is made of, and I quite like to kind of go, okay, what is the scene that we're trying to recreate on stage, for example in theatre, what would that look like if it was in the real world? So find a photo of something that is of a similar real world. What colors are coming out from that image? And then that can kind of almost help you determine the colors that you might want to think about using when you choose your LED, when you're picking like colors for the LED lights or your gels. And the way that if it's a naturalistic scene, if it's like an outdoor or indoor, like how is the light of nature reacting to objects in the image? Or for example, through an indoor scene, you may have open windows, which the way light reacts through a window into a room is quite interesting, and you might want to try and depict that on stage to give the feel that your scene is indoors.
And even when it's not naturalistic, you use nature. Nature is our kind of, nature is the best kind of teacher for this, in that if, for example, light coming through a window and you want to, in your non-realistic world, you want to kind of have that effect, but not actually have it quite so natural, you then either go really big with it, and you could make it kind of an over-the-top kind of light kind of coming from one direction. You go, okay, clearly not realistic, but kind of taken from that kind of stimulus of nature. So it's always really important to kind of look at how things actually are, and then figure out how you want to change it to suit the style that you're in. But yeah, looking at pictures is a great way of kind of starting and just looking at other people's design work, especially when you're starting out as a designer. And even now, after how many years, and I'm sure Jamie would agree after even longer than me, is I'm still constantly looking at other designers who are doing new and imaginative, or even just old kind of, but doing it well. And you kind of look and go, how did they make it so good? And then how can I better myself to match them, or attempt to match them? And it will take time. And a lot of designers have been doing it for many, many, many years. And that's why they're so good. And so it's always kind of, it's not just looking at nature, it's also looking at other people in the industry and how they work, because that's really important.
The other side of it, apart from nature, is obviously like semiotics, which is where you have a color which represents a feeling or an obvious reaction. So like red, red is obviously like, it could be love, it could be fire. So that's another way that it's often used in.
I'm in a forest, and then you just go green.
But actually, in the real world, it wouldn't.
It's not green.
It's not green in just one color, is it?
It's so many different colors, and again, that's how you make it more realistic. If you just go green, people will know you're in a forest, and they'll understand you're in a forest. If you want to make that look real, you wouldn't just use a single green. You'd use multiple greens. You'd use some whites. You'd use oranges, because if you look at a picture of a forest, there's so many colors in there, just from the light and what it reflects off of. So it's all about kind of paying attention to that detail. We then move on to the actual designing. And these are just some pictures from various shows. The first thing that's really important when thinking about designing is, what type of show am I actually designing for? So up the top here, we've got a kind of a box standard theatre kind of setup. You've then got a kind of a large ensemble theatre show. You've got a music gig. You've got kind of a dance show, and the lighting is so different on all of them, and kind of where you direct light from, what kind of light you'd use, is all really dependent on the kind of show you want. For example, theatre, it's very important to see people's faces and to see kind of their expressions and to see their lips moving, because they're talking and
they're telling a story.
And they're telling the story. So you want to see the features. So you make sure you have a nice face light, you have a top light, and you have backlight, and you make sure that it's kind of a really either well lit or kind of so people can see their faces. However, you then move on to a dance show, you don't need to see the dancers' faces. Suddenly it's all about how the light reflects off their bodies in different shapes, and how their movement kind of works alongside the light. So what kind of show you're trying to light, that's very important, because you wouldn't want to use the wrong kind of lighting. There's a beautiful example that Jamie came up with in our planning meeting for this. It's like fashion. You wouldn't wear a Speedo to a funeral. It's because it doesn't fit, and there's a certain way in which you should be doing stuff, and you wouldn't want to wear a Speedo to a funeral.
But I do like also to sometimes tried things which are sometimes thought of the wrong type of lighting, and sometimes it's those experiments which actually occasionally pull off as actually being quite radical and exciting and different, which might be something you're going for, but you actually come across it by accident because you have done something. So I like to do when I'm lighting design and rig is just you go for the safe things. So with theatre, obviously, make sure you've got face light, make sure you've got some backlight to show that the characters on stage are 3D and not just flat. But then chuck in some wildcard lights that kind of, oh, actually, I might just shove a light from under that table, or I might just go from a weird angle over there, and we might try and cast an odd shadow here and there. And then when you're programming and plotting, sometimes those random lights that you've just thought, well, I've just put that there just to see what happens. Actually, it can be the happy accident that actually gets used all the time and is the favorite of the director.
The second thing that's very important is what type of lighting are you trying to do? So there's lots of kind of ways that you can light people. So you're going for the functional lighting where you just want to see everything, and that's kind of one way. Do you want the kind of wow factor of kind of light shining through things? What kind of style are you going for? Do you want the wow factor? Do you want standard kind of safe but you know it works kind of lighting? Or do you want a mixture? I would always recommend going for a mixture because no matter what, almost any show I've ever done, yes, needs functional lighting, needs to be able to do what the director wants, but the amount of times in a tech, they've gone, I don't know quite what I want here. Do you know what I want here? And you kind of show them a kind of a wow factor light that you kind of put up because you went, I think it would look cool. And then they go, that is perfect. That's exactly what we want. Or can we change it slightly to make it fit? But sometimes wow factor lighting is definitely what we used to do. We touched on color scheme and obviously taking it from nature and taking color palette, but kind of picking your color scheme is very important and kind of what kind of your palette will be for the show. Gel picking. Now, gel picking takes ages. I spend quite a long time gel picking because I can say—
It's such a big range as well, isn't it?
Yeah, there's such a huge range. Even just an orange. You go, okay, how many oranges could there possibly be? Hundreds of oranges. That sounded weird. Hundreds of orange gel colors and gel numbers. And that's just in Lee filters, that is what we use here. But you've also got Roscoe, and you've got loads of different types of people, loads of manufacturers who create their own gel colors, and they compete against each other, and no gel is the same as another. Even if they're meant to be kind of the same orange-ish, because color is a spectrum, you can be slightly dark orange, or a slightly lighter orange, or a slightly pinker, or I don't know how you do pink or orange, but you can have there's such a range. I don't have a picture of it, but there is in the olden days, before it went all digital, you could have a swatch patch that is literally a thick, kind of almost little booklet that has all the different gels a particular brand do at that moment. And
you hang around at the end, I'll get some out.
Oh yeah, if you hang around at the end, Jamie will grab some because we've got some here. But they're just literally all the different colors. And sometimes you flick between two and you go, they're pretty much the same color, but they're not. As soon as you put a tungsten light through it, it's suddenly vastly different. You go, oh yeah, no, I prefer that orange to that orange to that orange. And you can spend hours doing it, and sometimes I do. Using the right fixture. Now this is important in terms of, I'm not going to go through all the different types of fixtures, but the fixture needs to do its job properly. So I mentioned earlier this is a Fresnel, and this is a spot, but its proper name is a profile. The difference, big difference, is the front of it. So this has barn doors, and they're very useful for shuttering off light, but they're not very adaptable because you can only really go into kind of squares and rectangles. And you can rotate it so that the square rectangle's at a slightly different angle, but you're kind of stuck to a kind of a rectangle shape. Profiles have 4 independently movable shutters, which are internal. In fact, I'm just going to turn the light on so you can see what I'm doing. Jake, could you dim the main lights? So I'm just going to put it on the floor so you can see. Hopefully. So basically, all this is it's metal shards, effectively, that you can bring in, and it does. Oh, let me just make this a bit harder to focus. So you bring it in, and it's basically 4 independent kind of lines that you can bring in. Again, it's only 4, but you could use 3 if you wanted. But as you can see, I can make any almost any 4-sided shape. I can even go into 3 sides of a nice triangle. And so it's a lot more adaptable depending on what you need it for. So you can either, quite often you have things like corridors of light, where you just bring in 2 sides, and it's a nice corridor. And this is used quite a lot in dance lighting. Love it. Dance lighting loves a good corridor. And it's very versatile in that sense. It can do quite a lot of what a Fresnel can do. It can do face light, it can do top light, but it's a lot better at doing things like that you need odd shapes or you need do stuff like that. Yeah, anything to add there?
Profiles, yeah, they consist of normally 1 or 2 lenses. Go into detail too much. There's normally a much bigger range. Profiles, particularly this one, you have the interchangeable lenses, so you can basically have like zoom lenses on them, so that the beam angle can be adjusted to be much bigger or tighter. They have a thing in device within them which enables you to put what's called gobos. So gobo is basically a metal disc which has holes in it, a bit like the pattern of on a pumpkin. Holes in it to let the light through, and it creates a projection on the floor depicting of what was cut out of that metal disc. Those can only be put into profiles because they need the lenses to be able to focus against it. Whereas like a Fresnel has a fixed lens which you can't change. And you can still change the size of the beam on the Fresnel by moving the lamp inside the fixture. So that's how the size of the fixture can show. So we can change, so it projects its light with a basic zoom range. The way that it's adjusted is by moving the lamp either closer or further away from the lens. So the closer it gets, the bigger the light output, and the further away, it's smaller. So you do have but with a Fresnel, the edges of the beam are always going to be soft and fuzzy, nice and soft. But with the profile fixture, you have the option to have the edge of the beam. You can see it. The edge of the beam is a lot more crisp. It doesn't have a lot of spill that you get from a Fresnel.
But we can adjust that focus, that we can go
so
soft.
You can make it, yeah, you can make the edges fuzzy or crisp.
The next step in terms of designing is kind of, oh no, not really, is choosing how many fixtures and also prioritizing the fixtures. So a venue doesn't have infinite fixtures. It'd be lovely if they did. But you only have a certain number of profiles, a certain number of Fresnels, a certain number of PCs, which are lots of different types of fixtures. They only have a certain number. And so in your designing, you need to know how many you have to play with. And then you have to start prioritizing. Because if you go, I want to do some wow factor thing, but I need 60 profiles for it, and I don't have 60 profiles, obviously you then have to rethink and find a different way of doing it, or kind of adapting your design. So it's very important to know kind of what fixture you have. It's also important to know, especially if you're asked, this is for if you're doing it, but also if you're asking someone else to do it, as in you're designing it and then giving it to someone, is understanding how many fixtures it takes to do kind of common effects. So, for example, a spotlight, you think is just one light, but it's not. Usually a spotlight, you would have one from above, at least one from above and one from in front. You can then have one from behind as well. Suddenly you're a spotlight that you think is very simple and easy is suddenly 3 fixtures, and suddenly you're running out of profiles, which is annoying when you want to, I just need one more spot and you don't have another profile. But and things, for example, a corridor of light, like I mentioned earlier, that usually uses at least 3 fixtures, depending on how long it is, because there's only a certain kind of how big the light, the
limitation of the profile's beam is of a certain size. So from a rig, so the rig here is 5.5 meters. Like a 25-degree beam would only fill like 2 or 3 meters on the floor. So that will, and you use a shutter, that will only get you like a few meters on the floor. To get the next part of your corridor that you're trying to achieve, you obviously need another one. And then to get the next part of your corridor to go even bigger, you need another one.
And that's just from one direction. But then obviously, as I said, you like people from multiple directions. So that's obviously, if you had them all up in the rig pointing this way, suddenly, yes, you've got a lovely face light, but you look flat. And so then you need some from the other way, which then suddenly doubles how many fixtures you need. So it's just very important to kind of bear that in mind, either when you're designing or if you're being designed for, kind of, if you just go, oh, I just need a spotlight, 3 corridors, and then go, oh, that's only 4 lights. No, it's a lot. And you a designer has to weigh that up as to what needs priority, and then sometimes things need to be cut, or they go, cool, could we make that a kind of really soft corridor, and we can start using Fresnels to assist in that instead. But it's such a compromise that a lot of the time people go, okay, now let's find another way of doing it. So it's very important to prioritize fixtures. In theatre, obviously, you prioritize a good face light. I always start with the face light, my back light, and top side light or top light, just because it's, in terms of theatre, it's very important to have the face lit and to make sure it's not a flat image for people. Up next is rigging. So this is the physical process of putting the lights up into the rig. This is usually, for full-size shows, that's usually at least a 2-day job for 2 technicians. So it's not a quick, oh, I need something for tomorrow, I'll quickly bash something up. It takes time, it takes planning, and it's quite difficult because if you think we're 5.5 meters up, we get some big ladders out or a scaff tower, and you've got to climb up the ladder with the light, put it up on the rig, come back down the ladder, make sure it works, then go back up the ladder to focus it, which is when you adjust where it's pointing and adjust where the barn doors are in and the shutters are in. So you need to make sure it's doing what it's meant to be doing, and then you come back down again. So for one fixture, you're going up the ladder at least twice, and sometimes it takes a little bit more adjusting. So you've done one light and another lantern's supposed to match it, and then you've done it with the other lantern and gone, oh, the other one's slightly different. Let's go back up the ladder and adjust that one again. It's a very long process, and it does take days. And obviously the more fixtures you have to put up, the longer it takes. So again, that all comes into when you're designing it, you also need to work out how long do I have to put it together. If some of the touring shows I've done, where we get there first thing in the morning, we have to rig, we have to focus, and then shows in the evening. So it's a quick 1 day. Suddenly I can't have a 70 fixture rig. I reduce that down to 25 kind of tops, just to make sure that I get it done with enough time so that we can then focus it, so that we can allow the actors to get some time on stage, because it's a new space for them as well. And then kind of do a run, kind of a mini Q2Q potentially, and then show in the evening. And we don't want to be rushing. I have one of the first tours I designed was a 75 fixture rig, and I regretted it at the first venue. But because I started cutting lights, started cutting fixtures halfway through the tour, but it's not advisable. And that's a big learning curve I learned from that one show, is suddenly I can't do that in a day. It takes me 2 days to rig it in my venue. Why on earth did I think I could do it in a day at other venues? And of course, some venues will do pre-rigging, so they'll rig it for you in advance. But even then, they can't focus it in advance. because they need my set, or they need to know what each light's doing. So suddenly, I then waste the whole day focusing 75 lights, and it takes a lot of time. And that was a big learning curve on the first show I did, where I kind of went, okay, cool, let's not do that again, because it's stressful. People are panicking, not just myself, but the director's panicking, the cast is starting to panic, and if the cast start panicking, that's bad, because they need to be focused on the show they're about to do, and the director needs to be focused to make sure that the cast is doing what they're doing. They don't need to be worrying whether the technician is going to be ready in time. So yeah, making sure you don't go overboard, and just knowing the time limitations you're going to have when you're touring this, or even just in a in-house show where you know you've only got 2 days to rig this, because of there's other activities in the space, or you've only paid for 3 days of time in the venue. You need to know what your time limits are. And in that, you also need to kind of allow a bit of time for unforeseen issues. So you can plan as best as you like, or as well as you like, and you're still going to run into issues. Because unfortunately, as many of you know with other technology, it goes wrong sometimes, quite often in some, depending on what you've got. So you need to allow for time to kind of troubleshoot and go, okay, I think I've done everything right, or I should have done everything right. Why is this light not coming on? And then you then need to troubleshoot, which I'll go into in a minute. Programming is the next stage, which you usually do in a technical rehearsal. And this is where you take your ideas, all the planning you've done, everything's rigged, everything's ready, and you sit down with the cast on the stage, sometimes, with the director, with the designer, and you basically, you plot, you go, cool, your first cue, house lights are on, audience are on their way in, what do we want having on the stage? Any light? Yes, no. If the answer is yes, what light on stage? What of the rig, of the fixtures that I've already put up, what do we put on stage? Do we want it to kind of be atmospheric? Do we want it to be nothing, so it's a surprise what the set looks like? What do we want? And you literally do that for every time a lighting changes, or the lighting on stage changes, we have to program that in. So in the space of a 5 minute, depending on how crazy the show is, you can do either one cue, where it just changes from inside to outside, or if you have kind of very subtle changes, a 5 minute gap, you could have 20, 30 cues quite happily. And it's just constantly, whoever's programming, you either keep going or you've programmed it to do it automatically, which is a lot nicer for whoever's opping the show. But if it can't be done automatically, so it's all dependent on the line gets said and then it changes, you have to do it as a cue. And all of those, regardless of how it's going to be opt, have to be programmed into the desk. So I can quite I tend to be, this usually works out to roughly-ish, kind of for every minute of a show, there's usually a cue. And they won't all be every minute, but sometimes there'll be crazy minutes, and sometimes there'll be nothing for a half an hour gap, maybe not half an hour gap. That's a very lucky show if you're offing it and there's a half an hour gap. It's happened once to me, where it was lights up, lights down, and the show was an hour and a half. So I literally clicked it for the lights to come up, and then I waited for the final cue after an hour and a half, clicked it again, lights down. I was very happy tech that day. Troubleshooting. Oh. Okay. Don't need help for that. Troubleshooting. There's a process you have to kind of go through when something's not working. So that's what troubleshooting is. And as a tech, that's kind of your job to work out what's wrong and fix it. So I'm going to use the example of a projector. So the projector's not working. So you've rigged it up, you know everything should be working, but you try and put something through it and it fails. It's just not, it's not allowing you to do anything. So as a tech, you kind of stand there for a moment and think through what could possibly be going wrong. And the most important thing is to start simple. There's no point in going, oh, we'll rip it all out and put a whole brand new system.
It must be the cable.
It must be this, it must be that. The amount of times, in fact, 9 times out of 10 is human error. So it's either you forgot to plug it in, or you forgot to attach it to your computer, or
there's a setting.
Yeah, there's a setting that you forgot to change. You're on the wrong input. Human error is 9 times out of 10 what's gone wrong. If, unfortunately, it is a 1 time out of 10, you then need to start going, cool, what's likely to have gone wrong? So if you know that you've never tested the power cable and it's an old cable, suddenly that's the most likely thing to have failed because it's old and you haven't tested it.
Yeah.
We test every year. We make sure it's all working, and we do kind of visual tests constantly. So we limit how much things can go wrong, but things go wrong. That's just, unfortunately, the way of life. But then if there's nothing obvious, then you start having to troubleshoot things that might not be so obvious. So, okay, so the power's a brand new cable. It's unlikely to be that. And I'm getting signal to here, but it's not going any further. So suddenly you limit where you need to look for the problem. And you go, cool, so it's probably this cable. So so then you swap that cable out. You don't need to swap the whole system. You see if that fixed the problem. If it does, excellent, you can get on with your day. If it's not, you then go, okay, so it's not that cable, or it's unlikely, it's clearly not that cable, something else is wrong. And you kind of keep working through steps of what's likely to have gone wrong until, hopefully, what has gone wrong gets fixed. Obviously, there are times where it is the projector, and that's then you have to sort the projector out. Or if you don't have a projector, you have to find a way around using a projector. But that's kind of the last resort, especially when it comes to something like a projector, which is expensive, and you're really hoping it's not the projector that's gone wrong, because then you'll have to buy a new projector or a new lamp in the projector, or send it off to get the electronics looked at, etc., etc. Projectors are, again, very complicated, especially the more modern ones. So if it's not the lamp, you kind of just send it off to the manufacturer and go, please fix it, because it's very complicated, or it can be very complicated. That was me done in terms of the actual talking at you for the past hour, I think. So I'm now going to hand it over if there's any questions about, it doesn't have to be necessarily about what I've specifically said. Maybe we should start there. But if you want me to expand, thanks for listening.
I fixed the projector, Nathan.
You fixed it? Oh, just a clap on. Hold on. So are there any questions from the room or Zoom? Yeah, I was on Zoom. Yes.
What do you need to play around with the QLab?
So you do need an Apple Mac computer.
That's the only
It's
downside.
only on Apple Mac. The software is free to download for the audio. The basic audio version of QLab is completely free to use, and you can use it in shows. You have to have an Apple Mac computer. It's not on Windows. And you can download it for free. Basically, as you use QLab more and you want to delve into complicated audio, which uses more than like stereo output, uses like multiple outputs. So you would need like a fancy sound card which has multiple outputs. You'd also need to pay QLab more money to enable the multiple outputs and the extra features that you might want with the Pro Audio license. So you can do like EQing, and you can do microphone inputs, things like that. And also, if you want to use video on QLab, you have to pay extra for a license. But you can rent the licenses for like $3 to $5 a day, I think. Or you can pay them a load of money, and then you get the license fully opened up.
Lots of people like to go for the renting because they do a very nice and useful way that, say you've paid £5 for the license for one day, and then you've paid £5, and then you pay, like, as you go on, they actually, on your account, they accumulate that. And when you've paid off a QLab license, they will just give it to you, as in you've paid for it across the shows you've done. So you don't have to pay it all out in one. You can go show by show, day by day.
Eventually, yeah, you'll get
Eventually, you'll have bought the license.
Bought it, yeah.
But like Jimmy says, it's free on the basic version, where you can do stereo output and as many cues as you like. You just can't do kind of the audio effects on it, and that's when you have to delve into the Pro license for the audio. And then Pro Video, you can do video to your native screen. So if it's just your screen, then you can use video on the free license. But then as soon as you want to put an external projector, you then have to pay for the Pro video license. But it all unfortunately does have to be on a Mac because it's just where the software is housed, and it is better. It's industry standard software, and unfortunately our industry does tend to lean towards Mac programs.
Mainly because of the quality of the hardware guarantees in a show situation that you want to be able to rely on your equipment not breaking down. Apple Macs hardware is generally more robust.
Yeah,
because it's better quality.
Also more expensive, but more robust. Any other questions?
There are Windows alternatives to Keylab that I don't use, but there are. I think it's Show Control Software S. Does anyone know? No. Yeah, there are a few other alternatives that are very, very similar on Windows. So there,
yeah. Any other questions? I don't mind no questions. As I said, this was a really whistle-stop tour.
I've got a question for you, Nathan. What was the most technically complicated show you've worked on?
I'll have to split that into. So there was a show that had the most cues, which I was pressing the button. So it was a 40-minute piece, and I had, I think it was 170 lighting and 170 something sound cues. So I was literally going, constantly pressing buttons. So that was the most complicated. And that was a dissertation piece at Plymouth Marjon University. But the most technically challenging was probably I did the trial by Burkhoff. I think Burkhoff. I can't remember. But it was a touring show. In fact, it was the touring show. That was way too many lights, or way too many fixtures in the rig. But that aside, it was still very demanding because we had loads of fixtures, but then we had 4 hanging microphones in all the corners that all were EQ'd differently and had different sound effects through QLab, doing kind of echoes and cool stuff. And then I had 5 hanging lights that would get swung at points in the show. And so in terms of kind of when I had to fix my lighting, kind of someone then swinging the light, they were throwing light everywhere. So I just had to, it was quite technically challenging in the tech rehearsal, kind of making sure everything worked exactly how we wanted it. And on the sound side, there was lots of overlapping cues that were just kind of, by the end of it, I'd managed to make it so it's pretty much running on its own for the kind of crazy parts. But in the original tech, we kind of did lots of pressing, and I was kind of going, this is a lot, because then I also had lots of lighting cues that were at different times to the sound cues, and kind of getting my mind around how I was doing that. And although I had a stage manager, brilliant stage manager, calling it, so they had the script in front of them going, LX1, go, sound cue, go. But kind of even that was then another input into me having to listen and then hit it at the right point, make sure I use the right hand at the right point so I don't hit a sound cue rather than a lighting cue. And it's, yeah, the trial was was trialing.
Yeah.
And that came here.
Another question. So, has anything really badly gone wrong during the show? And like technically, like, and what did you do during the show to kind of resolve it in any way?
Yes, so it was on this very stage, is a good example. So I was halfway through the show, I had a little bit of a gap, and I noticed one of my boom's LEDs was not working, or it wasn't quite behaving how it was meant to. I couldn't quite figure out why, and there was nothing I could do from the desk. And I knew I had about a minute and a half to fix this problem. And so so my stage manager, the same stage manager, was in the box next to me, and she was calling, and she's also quite good at tech. So I was like, and the next bit was just a single lighting cue to go. I was like, can you just cover me if I don't get back in time? And I came that back way, came around the back and troubleshot in the wing mid-show what was going wrong with my LED. It turned out that one of the actors, I don't know how because we taped it down, but had managed to slightly dislodge the DMX, and so the fixture was only getting part of the information coming to it, so it was kind of doing weird flickering and flashing, and it was the wrong color, and I was like, and it was ruining. And I knew that not the next queue, but the queue after was an entirely boom kind of queue, and so I knew that it was really important that it was either working or off for that bit, because it would ruin the whole look. Without it there, the scene would have survived probably, but so I had to run down, troubleshot, got back up, and I just missed the cue that I got her to do instead. So that was probably the most challenging tech-wise.
I've had many instances where things have gone wrong, and it's try to come up with or find a way on top of your head. Can I just, from the desk, can I turn it off so it doesn't come on, or is there a way to make sure it doesn't hurt anyone? And that's the main thing.
That's the nice way.
It's the art of the best technician is to not be seen by the audience, to make the stage look as best as possible, and if things go wrong, try and fix it without people noticing. And
it's important to note that almost every show I've ever done, something will go wrong at some point in the process of from even if we just take a show day, something will go wrong. And like Jamie said, the art of a good technician is not to be perfect, but to make the audience think it's gone perfectly well. So if it's something that's going wrong, for example, I had one show where a gel fell out of the fixture halfway through the show, and I saw it, and luckily it was in a easy enough scene. But again, a couple of scenes later, I think it was a deep blue, and it was about to be a nighttime scene. So suddenly a fixture with no gel in would be very noticeable in a nighttime scene. And so at the desk, I quickly went into the patch and I unpatched it. So the fixture never came on for that scene because there were other fixtures doing the same or doing similar enough jobs to cover it. So for an audience point of view, they never knew that light should have come on. And it didn't look weird because it was still a nighttime scene with all the other fixtures. But it's about, like Jamie said, it's about making the audience not realize that something's gone wrong technically.
Not that stuff goes wrong all the time.
No.
But actually, also the art of a good technician is to make sure stuff doesn't go wrong.
Absolutely. Make sure that there are redundancies in place to prevent you having to panic. And I don't know, I may have rigged that light. I don't know why the gel came out. But sometimes things happen. Usually things don't go wrong in a show. Usually that's the point of the day where you've got the rigging, you've got the focusing, you've got the rehearsals. It's that things go wrong there, so that at showtime it doesn't go wrong. But 9 times out of 10, something will go wrong across the process. And if it doesn't, well done. You've done a brilliant job somehow and avoided everything that could possibly go wrong. And that is obviously the aim, but it doesn't happen all the time, unfortunately. Yes.
Does the audience ever notice that things go wrong?
Yes. There's only been one show that I've done that has been a glaringly obvious mistake I made, and especially in the show as a technician, tends to be you make a mistake once and you'll never do it again. And I have never done this since the early days, very early days, and it was the final cue of the whole show. It had been going crazy, and on the music cue was a snap blackout. On that music cue, I was getting ready, prepping, I was watching. On the last cue, I hit the wrong button. So the go for the ION and for all EOS desks, the go button is right below the back button, so you can go back. The issue is I hit the back button, so rather than snap blackout, I went to the previous scene. I was like, no. So I did a slow fade to black instead with the Grandmaster and just covered it. So the audience maybe didn't notice, but everyone on stage who suddenly on the final number went, "Dah!" And suddenly it didn't go black like it was meant to, it went to a different scene. It happens. Like I said, I've never done it since, and especially if it's a snap blackout, I am staring at the go button, making sure my finger is perfectly aimed so to make sure it's the right button. But yeah, you're going to make, technicians make mistakes. The art of it is try not to, and if you do, never make the same mistake again.
That's the beauty of doing dress rehearsals, isn't it? And doing rehearsals and practicing. Being a technician, is there like any special qualifications you have to do, or is there any courses that are kind of advised?
You don't have to to be a lighting technician or to be a designer. There's no particular courses. Obviously, it's very useful to do courses because you need to learn from people. So I learned a lot from shadowing Jamie, but you can go and do courses. So there are university courses, there are college courses, which some of you are on. Yes. So there are courses to help you. I always think of courses like that, similar to my acting degree, is I have a degree in it, but it's not the degree that's important, it was the training I did to become the actor, or to become a better actor. And it's the same for the courses in lighting. You don't need to do the course, but doing it, you learn the skills to improve and to train and be better. There are some courses that you, in terms of being a technician, so to go up ladders, there are courses, there's ladder safety courses, to make sure you are safe with the ladders and you're safe with working from height. You can go on electrical, you can go on courses that teach you all about the electrics inside fixtures, inside desks. The ABTT do a great bronze, silver and gold award where you learn things like how to do knots, how to do splicing, how to do weight load testing, how to do pant testing, how to do kind of the skills that you kind of want to get a certificate in, but you don't, for some of that, you don't need the training in it. You need to be, you can shadow someone doing it and learn on the job, which is how I learn. So I've done no formal training, but I have been out doing it for 7 years in the industry, and I like to think I'm pretty competent at it by now. But as I said, constantly learning and constantly also trying to keep up with technology as it changes year on year. Yes.
How long after you started with tech did you have your first show?
So it was part of the thing with Tech Force is that we would not just training week to week, we were invited to come and support on shows. Now my first actual in the industry show was actually before I did this training, and it was because Jamie, just before I came to Tech Force, Jamie said, oh, we're just doing a festival down at the Royal William Yard, go and just kind of observe and just watch. Jamie wasn't there that day, but someone else was doing it. And I got there, and they're like, oh, you're Nathan, we've got told you're coming. Quick, you sit on the desk, and you can opt this. And I was like, okay. So that was a bit of a baptism by fire. Luckily, it was a simple lights up, lights down. I went, this button, cool, okay. And so I jumped right in. I can't claim that as my first show. So although I didn't do any formal training at my sixth form before I went to uni, I did a lot of tech. So I kind of knew bits. I didn't know how to do most of the stuff I can do now, but I could simply put lights on and make them work. I could make a desk work, but that was about it. So it wasn't my first show, but it was definitely in the industry baptism by fire. But it was just a little fringe festival show that was just lights up, lights down. Anything more complicated, I think I'll but
that's the great thing about working as a technician, and in this industry, the scale is really big. So you can, when you're starting out, you can just start out on something really tiny and simple and really fun and easy, and it's not stressful and it's really nice. And that's also how I got into the work I do, by starting small baby steps, and then you learn more and more, and then you get great things.
it's one of the best things I like on Barbican Theatre as well, is that although this is in the grand scheme of things, a relatively small theatre, we have quite a lot of tech in here, and also the kind of the outreach stuff they do. So I saw on Facebook the other day, Thea, who's in the audience, doing there's a little challenge where you start with no more than 2 sources of light. and you make a little film, and the whole point is you just, this was all about a specific, there's a theme attached to it. Go to Barbican Theatre Facebook page, and you'll find a video, and they're putting out lots of stuff for you to kind of just challenge yourself. But this was literally 2 sources of light, no more, not allowed any audio, just make something cool. And there was a theme. So there was
The unknown.
the unknown.
Yeah, so it's this half-term challenge from Thea. It's come up with just a little mini video that has the theme of unknown. Just use 1 or 2 little lights in your house or garden, and submit it to us, and then we're going to put it together. Yeah.
Little plug there for that. But yeah, so it starts small. Definitely starts small. Nobody in all of tech history has ever started out doing a full design of a touring musical. It just doesn't happen. You start small. You start with a lights up, lights down show. You start with a show that's just a couple of face lights, maybe some backlights, maybe your LED if you're lucky. You start small, and eventually you grow into full size rigs, where you have people in the audience, hopefully, going, "Wow, that's awesome," or "Oh, that was pretty cool." Quite often, shows you do, the audience don't even notice the lighting. That's kind of the curse sometimes, being a light technician. Sometimes they just go, "Well, I can see everyone," and you go, "How could you see everyone?" But then sometimes that's the best compliment. There was a show where we didn't want to see, but like the changes were so subtle across the whole show. Everyone just thought the lighting was pretty much the same. But if the lighting state that was at the beginning was on scene 3, someone wouldn't be seen, but they didn't see the light come on because the whole point was that we didn't want them to notice it. So then when someone goes, "Was it just not lights up, lights down?" Suddenly I was like, "Excellent, like, I've done my job." How we wanted it to go. Obviously, if they're meant to see the lighting and they didn't, sometimes you're like, "Did you see the cool light? Was it cool light?" And they're like, "No, I didn't really notice it." And you're like, "Oh." But no, sometimes it's good to have a lighting scene, sometimes you don't want it to be seen. Again, that all comes down to discussion with the director, whether it's functional lighting, wow factor lighting, etc. Any other questions? Okay, that's cool. Thank you very much for coming. I think we'll end it there. Thank you all for coming, and thanks for watching. I hope that doesn't make it